Listen, and we're going to start with our winner of our Name the Alternative Name for the Profiles in Courage book, Casey Wass. I'm now going to ask Casey, yes, my dear. So Casey, we said yesterday that this westward expansion was causing trouble with Native Americans because our manifest destiny thought we got the right to just kind of crawl over anybody we wanted as we moved west. And we said that the United States government wanted to expand westward, and Native Americans became an issue because the government's philosophy on settling the West was that of conquering the land, whereas the Native Americans saw the land as a gift. So the United States military had to be brought in, and they had their own philosophy. They had a two-part philosophy concerning the future of Native Americans that lived in the West that were in our way. What was their two-part philosophy in order?
They would first contain them, and then they would exterminate.
Yeah, they couldn't. The first was containment. If we can contain them and put them on the reservation, that's good. But if they won't go on the reservation, we can't contain them, we're going to exterminate them. Okay, that was their philosophy. Then we talked about the Plains Indians' way of life. And Josh helped these guys that weren't here and tell me the three things that made up the Plains Indians' way of life.
They believed in freedom, religion, and buffalo.
Yep, so three things that came up they had to have their way of life was religion, freedom, and the buffalo. Now the Plains Indians' way of life could only exist as long as these two things stayed constant. What were they, Brady? Freedom of movement and abundance of game, or especially buffalo. If there wasn't enough buffalo, their way of life would be disrupted. If they would not be allowed to move from place to place, their freedom would be disrupted. They were nomadic people. They led a migratory lifestyle. Their villages were portable. And how many times, Olivia, during the course of the year did they move?
3 to 4.
And why? What they move? What made them move?
They moved with the buffalo.
Moved where the buffalo were migrating. Very good. Now we said that the buffalo provided the Plains Indians with most of its food supply. They also used most of the buffalo for everything else. They were not a wasteful people. And when buffalo hunters came and started shooting buffaloes only for the hides and left everything else to rot, that's when Indian people became frustrated and caused some of these problems we're talking about. Then we talked about the role of the Plains Indian male. Okay? Hunter, I won't go to you. You might have it. Well, go ahead. Hunter, tell us what their roles were. Guy wasn't here. Hey, guy wasn't here yesterday. Okay, go ahead.
That was the provider and protector.
Provider and protector. Another name for a provider was a hunter, and another name for a protector was warrior. Okay? Tristan, can you tell us how much time the Native American male spent on being a provider?
80%.
About 80%, which meant he spent 20% of the time as a protector. Okay? Dalton, what were young males doing until they turned 5?
They would usually stay with their mother or grandmother.
Right, and after they turned 5, they got their warrior and hunter training till what age, Lauren? 15. Once they were 15, they were very proficient in both the role of protector and provider. What was the bow made out of for both a hunter and a warrior, Sage?
Oh,
Okay, usually, why was it oak? Why wasn't it some other wood?
they like those?
They liked oak for a certain reason. Anybody know why?
They were
It was
strong.
a very hard wood, which meant that it would not break easily and could bend. Okay, it was formed in the shape of the new moon, which is a partial moon. What were the arrows made out of, Siobhan? Willow. And what was the difference, Siobhan, between a warrior arrow and a hunter arrow?
A hunter arrow had 3 feathers to grab the horse.
Okay?
A warrior arrow had 2 feet.
Okay, very good. A 3-feathered arrow, which was used by the hunter, had a guide arrow so you could aim and take your time at game, etc. A warrior arrow had 2 feathers because it would fly faster, and they weren't interested in aiming. They were interested in shooting as many as they could at one time at the target. Okay? We said that the arrow was marked by a color to determine which hunter made the kill for his family. And what were the arrowheads originally made out of, Morg? They first started making arrows way back. Stone, right? And Ivan, what were they made out of later, or which were more efficient?
Barrel metal.
Okay, and for you who weren't here, you ever seen those whiskey barrels? Sometimes they cut them in half, you put flowers in them, and the metal that keeps them together, that's called metal hoop. Okay, hoop metal from a barrel. They used to use that when they would find the barrels. Okay, how long was both a hunter arrow and a warrior arrow? Eaten? What? You didn't get it. That could have been maybe because you weren't writing too much down yesterday. Okay, so how about you? Do you know, Elise?
Yeah.
Why? Why? Because you got it all written down? Okay, let's see.
It's like from here to your fingertips.
What's here?
Your elbow.
To your
To the finger
plus a hand. So would everybody's arrow be necessarily the same length? No. Some could, but mostly they were different. Okay, how about the arrow tip? Why don't you explain that to us, Paris? Why was the arrow tip of a hunter vertical? That's right, because an animal's ribs are placed differently. Okay? All right, how about the arrow tip of a warrior arrow? Delaney?
It was horizontal.
Why?
Humans' ribs
Are horizontal. Very good. All right. We talked about different strategies that the hunter used when he was hunting for buffalo. When he was on foot, he was no different than our bow hunters today. They camouflaged up in costumes so they couldn't be seen. During the winter months, they would use snowshoes and travel across deep snow and push the buffalo into the deep snow to bag them down for easy kills. When they had access to horses, the buffalo would be run hard to get their blood pumping, allowing the animal to bleed more profusely when shot, which caused earlier death. And Siobhan came up with another one that was right. Give it to us again. Buffalo jumps. They would run the buffalo either on foot or on horses off jumps, large cliffs, and they would die as they hit the bottom or be so disabled it would be an easy kill as well. Okay, we talked about the role of the warrior. We mentioned some of the things there. What was two ways, Maddie, that a Native American warrior could show his worth to the tribe?
He could steal enemy supplies, especially horses.
Okay.
Show bravery in the face of an enemy.
Okay, what was showing bravery in the face of the enemy called? Okay, Macklin, and what do you think it was if you kept track of it? What's it called? Counting. It wasn't even here yesterday. It's all over. Okay. We talked about intense fighting between Native Americans and not only rival tribes, but also white men. We also talked about during these battles, oftentimes the dead were scalped and mutilated beyond recognition. That tradition continued because the Indian philosophy behind mutilization of the dead had to do with the Indian belief of the afterlife or reincarnation. They believed they would meet their enemies in battle later, and they wanted to put them at a disadvantage. So if Tristan and I were battling it up, and I cut off his right leg at the knee, when he reincarnated back, he would come back without a leg from the knee down, which would put him at a disadvantage. Before I go into battle, the Indians often looked to religion for strength. They would look to the Great Spirit, which was their God, for direction through a vision. A vision was usually a drug-induced dream that would give them an idea what the upcoming battle was going to look like. They usually smoked peyote prior to that. Not always, but usually. Didn't get near as good a dream if you didn't use the peyote, I can just tell you that. Then we talked yesterday on this subtopic, and we'll continue today, about settlers moving westward and the Fort Laramie Treaty. There were two areas of land that were considered very sacred to the Plains Indians. Sheriff, give us those.
Their burial grounds and their prime hunting grounds.
Their prime hunting grounds and their spiritual burial areas, that's right. And by the 1850s, more and more white settlers were moving west, and they were going to Oregon and California and Utah. And some maybe knew this, but most did not, that they would travel right through these prime hunting grounds and these burial grounds and upset Native Americans. And Native Americans would then retaliate by either harassing or killing those settlers as they went west because they violated their areas. Because of this, the government had to get involved, and they didn't really want to send in military troops right off the bat. So what they did is they negotiated a treaty with 8 different Plains Indian tribes, including the Sioux. And that treaty was called the Fort Laramie Treaty, and the agreement gave the Sioux Indians how much a year? $50,000 in exchange for the safety of settlers traveling westward and the government receiving permission from those 8 Indian tribes to build forts along the western trails. And we said one of the most prevalent forts that you should be acquainted with, and we will get more acquainted with, is Fort Phil Kearny, which we'll talk about later, which is by Sheridan. It was a fort that was built to provide protection, food, and shelter for settlers moving west. Okay, we'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, that's where we left off. Now, all of these 8 Indian tribes, including the Sioux, signed the treaty. And the person that signed the treaty would be the what? Chief. Well, the one that signed the treaty, the Fort Laramie Treaty, on behalf of the Sioux, was Sioux Chief Red Cloud. He was the one that signed the treaty giving the Sioux people this agreement with the federal government. Now, this really worked pretty well, kiddos. From 1851 to 1865, during that 14-year period of time, 1851 to 1865, the federal government made these annual payments, and the Plains Indians upheld their end of the bargain for 14 years, 1851 to 1865. Now, if Paige gets this right, I'll bring in ice cream bars by the end of the week. Oh, she's going to be gone anyway. Now, who has been gone when I brought treats? Anybody been gone when I brought treats? What do I usually do? Save you. So, you're on the hook again. See, that's her passive-aggressive way of saying, no, let me ask you this question. So, why in the world did that treaty work so well from 1851 to 1865, but we started having problems in 1865? Shh. I may give you a lifeline. Already? Think about that. What happened in 1865 that might make the Indians upset? Because somehow they were okay from 1851 to 1865 when not a lot of people were going west. But what made people start going west in vast numbers? Oh, you're going to say it, I think. You don't know what it's called? About 500,000 people got killed in here.
Oh my gosh.
What was that thing that happened that all of a sudden ended?
Pick the wrong person.
No, not listening. You're too worried. You're too worried about it instead of listening to. What's that thing that happened that caused a lot of people to move westward that really kind of devastated our country about 1865? Paige. What? What'd you say? I mean, he's giving you, he's spreading it on pretty thick here. Here's a warning. He hadn't had an ice cream bar since the Civil War because he wrestled this year.
I know, the Civil War.
Civil War, yeah. Yeah, after the Civil War, all these people, hey, what were people's lives like after the Civil War? Terrible, especially those that lived in the South. So, not having a better option, really Southerners, not only Southerners, but mainly Southerners did two things. What are the two things they did after the Civil War because they had nothing to go home to? They either moved westward to try to start over, or they joined the military. That's what they did, okay? So, more and more settlers were making their way westward through the hunting grounds and spiritual areas after the Civil War. So, again, the Indians saw this as a violation of the treaty. They got their 50,000, but they kind of expected them to stay away from what? Those areas. Okay? Well, that didn't happen. And because of this movement westward after the Civil War, powerful Sioux chiefs, other than Red Cloud, made the decision, we're not going to abide by this treaty anymore. Too many white men coming west. Not what we're comfortable with. How about Texas? Remember that? Texas was okay. Mexico was okay with Texas having 200 people move into that area. What happened when everybody started coming into Texas? We had a war over it, did we not? The Mexican War, right? Well, we're going to have another war over this, but it's going to be called the Plains Indian War. Okay? So, the chiefs, the Sioux chiefs, that decided that they would refuse to abide by the Fort Laramie Treaty in 1865 were Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Gall. Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Gall. They criticized Red Cloud as the white man's chief and decided he was past his time when it came to make decisions in the best interest of the Sioux tribe. So because of the movement westward after the Civil War, powerful Sioux chiefs refused to abide by the Fort Laramie Treaty, which included Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Gall. Matter of fact, Sitting Bull was so upset he said, "How can one man represent all of the Sioux? We will not abide by such a treaty. It was okay until a lot more people started moving. Now, Sitting Bull and his Sioux warriors are going to resist the white man moving west, which is going to result in a Plains Indian War that basically is going to end once and for all at Wounded Knee. But what's the big battle that really turned the tide sort of in favor of Native Americans? Battle of the Little Bighorn. Although that victory was great emotionally and spiritually, but it was the beginning of the end for what? Native Americans, because we didn't like getting our butts kicked like that. Okay? So we'll talk about that later. All right, that'll take us then to our next subtopic, which is building of forts along the Bozeman Trail. Anybody know what the Bozeman Trail is? A lot of people think the Bozeman Trail just goes through Bozeman, Montana. It was named after John Bozeman, and what was it? It was a trail from east to west. And along that trail, including the Oregon Trail, was the Bozeman Trail. It was a different trail, but people followed. Does that make sense to get west? So what happened, to protect those settlers that were going along the Bozeman Trail, we began to build forts for protection. Now actually, when did we start building these forts, realistically? When did we start building these forts along the Bozeman Trail? Was it in 1865? No, it was actually by 1851 we were given it a shot. We had to get more serious after 1865. But we'll go from there. Okay. Now, what was the Bozeman Trail? I'll give you the definition. It was a route from Fort Laramie in the Wyoming Territory to Virginia City in the Montana Territory. That was the Bozeman Trail. The Oregon Trail was different. But the Bozeman Trail was a route from Fort Laramie in the Wyoming Territory to Virginia City in the Montana Territory. Okay? So Fort Laramie's down here in Laramie, right? And Virginia City, oh, it's so tiny they're not having it on this map. But Virginia City is going to be about there. So it's a trail between my two fingers here, basically. So if people got to Fort Laramie okay, then they built these forts along the Bozeman Trail to protect them, because this was the more hostile area. Once you got to Fort Laramie, up to present-day Bozeman, actually it's up by Virginia City, which is probably 80 miles from Bozeman. That became kind of a tough area for Indian resistance. Now, what else was going along in Montana that caused people to travel the Bozeman Trail besides settling, get the new start? Gold, very good. There were a lot of gold discoveries in Montana. There was one at Virginia City. There was one at Nevada City, which is like a mile or two away. There was one in Bannock, which is by present-day Dillon, kind of in the western part. And people were traveling this Bozeman Trail from Fort Laramie to Virginia City to go up and find their fortune in gold. And that was even more prevalent. You had more people going then than you did that were just settling, because they had this gold fever, so to speak. Bannock, B-A-N-N-A-C-K. Virginia City, Nevada City, and Bannock, B-A-N-N-A-C-K. Well, obviously, because the Sioux interfered with those people, did they not? Both the gold rushers and the settlers. And so the settlers got upset, and the gold rush guys, and they demanded the government take action. Does anybody remember John Pope? We ever talk about John Pope? What John Pope do? He was a general in what? Civil War. Okay? Well, he was still serving our country, and it was U.S. General John Pope that was given orders from Washington, D.C. to establish 3 forts along the Bozeman Trail to provide protection, food, and lodging for those settlers that were moving west. Is it possible they would move in the winter, and the only reason they went into one of these forts was to get shelter for a month and kind of heal up a little bit? Sure. Other reasons why: you might be under Indian attack, so you took refuge there, okay, etc. So it would be U.S. Army General John Pope, Civil War veteran, that would be given orders from Washington, D.C. to establish 3 forts along the Bozeman Trail. Now, between 1862 and 1867, during that 5-year period of time, between 1862 and 1867, historians approximate that about 1,500 people traveled the Bozeman Trail. That's quite a few, especially if they're under siege all the time from hostile Native Americans. So it was estimated that between the years 1862 and 1867, approximately 1,500 people traveled the Bozeman Trail, either to the gold fields of Montana or for a better life. So, I'm not going to tell you about all three forts because they don't really are relevant to you because they're not in this state. I am going to tell you about one of the three forts that was established though, and that was Fort Phil Kearny. Fort Phil Kearny. Anybody remember the name Phil Kearny? What conflict did we talk about that Phil Kearny was involved in? No? He'd have been a little old. Yeah, that's not a bad guess. Not War of 1812. What other war did General Phil Kearny fight in? What's that? Mexican War. We talked about him. You'll probably find him in your notes if you look back. So this fort is named after Mexican War General Phil Kearny. Anybody been near Sheridan, near Story, Wyoming? Anybody been in that area? Well, the fort is located on the Big and Little Piney Creeks. It's located on both the Big Piney Creek and the Little Piney Creek near Story, Wyoming. And Story is just not too far from Sheridan. Nobody ever been there before? Okay. Now, once the fort was built, it would be inhabited by the U.S. Army 18th Regiment. That would be the regiment that would be stationed there to provide protection for settlers traveling along the Bozeman Trail. So the newly established fort, once it was built, would be inhabited